Chris Williamson back here with you alongside CBS senior fantasy writer Jamey Eisenberg. And Jamey, horrible news for him and also fantasy managers who felt he would generate maybe a lot of fantasy points. So how will this affect their team? It's got to be really just a gut-wrenching feeling for this Ravens team that just seems to always have an injury or multiple injuries that really derail the season.
Yeah, Ronnie Stanley banged up too as well, so hopefully he'll be okay. But, you know, the Dobbins one really hurts my heart because this was the guy that I drafted the most of. I don't know if I was higher on any player at any position than I was for JK Dobbins. And so, you know, my heart goes out to him. You know, I hope that it's a speedy recovery and he, you know, can come back and be ready to go for the start of the 2024 campaign. But, you know, to lose this season is really detrimental to him, knowing that this is a contract year and, you know, he had a lot of big things in front of him. So, we'll see who steps up and replaces him. Gus Edwards would be my favorite option. You know, we've seen him step up in the past whenever they've had a running back missing time, whether it was Mark Ingram or JK Dobbins. You know, the 2020 campaign, we saw him step up there as well. Both guys tearing their ACLs in 2021. Justice Hill did have the 2 touchdowns, but I think he's still going to be the second guy there. So Gus Edwards is going to be very popular off the waiver wire, and we'll hopefully get that type of production that we were going to get from JK Dobbins out of Edwards for the rest of the season.
Yeah, he's really got to maximize his opportunity to make sure the Ravens know that he can bring the things to the table that they want. Now, Colts rookie QB Anthony Richardson, Jamey, looked pretty good Sunday versus the Jaguars defense, throwing for over 200 yards, scoring a rushing TD. Did have that critical pick into zone coverage late in the fourth. How would you evaluate his NFL debut?
I think, you know, you hit the nail on the head. Inconsistent to a certain extent, but the fact that he was able to look a little bit better, I think that a lot of people expected as a passer, was encouraging and didn't necessarily have to do as much with his legs yet. But the fact that he had the team in contention in the fourth quarter speaks to, I think, where he can build off of and hopefully get better. But for a fantasy quarterback, he looked really good. You know, the fact that he got you over 20 fantasy points, not the toughest of defenses, but still wasn't a soft landing spot facing a Jacksonville team that many people expect to be the class of the division, and certainly getting off to a good start offensively. Their defense did leave a lot of plays on the table, but again, you mentioned the interception, so they were able to convert a big play at the end of the game. But I thought from what Richardson was able to accomplish in his first start, really getting Michael Pittman involved, that was huge. We'll see if he can get the other receivers going as well. And again, I think we'll see more of him from a running perspective. Thankfully, he's okay after getting banged up at the end of the game. But I do think you could feel confident starting him as a #1 fantasy quarterback for the rest of the season if he's going to play like this.
Yeah, and Colts fans should be pleased. Of course, it's a long season. But what they saw so far, you have to like what you've seen. Now, Jamey, let's talk about Calvin Ridley, though. Because that brother performed for the Jags like he ain't miss a beat after not playing the entire 22 season. 8 catches, 101 receiving yards, and a score against the Colts. Made a lot of fantasy owners giddy, am I right?
100%. You know, a lot of people were taking him in the 3rd round, depending on the time you did your draft. You might have gotten him in the 4th round, maybe even a little bit later than that. But the upside was clearly evident today. And granted, again, the defense not exactly the best of opponents that he'll be facing, but Trevor Lawrence loves Calvin Ridley. That was definitely on display. Now, the flip side of that is, unfortunately, Christian Kirk was a big disappointment, and we hope to not see that the same way moving forward. Zay Jones was really the second option there in the passing game, but Calvin Ridley looks like a star and looks like the guy that we saw when he was at his best with the Atlanta Falcons. So we got a chance to speak to Matt Ryan, now a member of our team here at CBS, as part of our draftathon coverage leading up to you know, the preseason and the start of the season when drafts were still hot and heavy. And Matt Ryan said expect him to come out and look like Calvin Ridley, and by God did he look like Calvin Ridley. So we're excited to see that player back, and he's going to be a potential top 5 wide receiver for the rest of the season.
So he looked like a star, and your start of the week was Tua, who absolutely delivered big time for the Dolphins. What stood out most from what you saw from the Miami signal caller?
Throw to Tyreek Hill, throw to Tyreek Hill, and throw to Tyreek Hill. That's going to certainly lead to a lot of big games. But, you know, this was one of the scenarios where you looked at, you know, going into the week, it was a high point total, so you thought this could be a back-and-forth type of game. Thankfully, it lived up to it, and Tua definitely did his part. And so, you know, a little bit concerned without Teron Armstead there, but certainly those concerns were put to bed. He's going to look like this. He's going to stay healthy. He's going to challenge for 5,000 yards and, you know, close to 45-plus touchdowns this season. You know, so that was what he was on pace for last year before the concussion started to become a problem. And, look, I get it. A lot of fantasy managers were concerned, can he make it through the season? Can he be that guy? Well, for 1 week, he was definitely that guy. And so as long as they can protect him and they can keep him, you know, his receivers healthy, we didn't see the best of Jalen Waddle today, but we certainly saw the best of Tyreek Hill, and you saw some other guys step out, which was fun to see. So Tua's got the potential to be a top 5 quarterback. That's what we said. Can he stay healthy? Yes, then he can be that type of player. And so for 1 week, it was awesome, and I'm glad that he delivered for the fantasy managers who trusted him.
Yeah, when they're healthy, when he's healthy, they have such an electrifying offense. Okay, let's move to another exciting offense, right? The 49ers maybe have a math problem on offense because you got so many talented offensive ballers in Brandon Ayuk, Christian McCaffrey, Deebo Samuel, and George Kittle. But He only got one ball. So what do you think might have to change for them, or do you feel like things will, balance out as the weeks go on, where somebody in 1 week gets a whole lot of catches, and then the next week, it's another, but it's somebody else's turn?
So the best part of this was twofold. One, Brock Purdy looking fine against obviously a tough defense on the road, so you don't have to worry about him necessarily fading or having a disappointment, at least not yet with the elbow. So he looked great, getting the 2 touchdowns out of Brandon Ayuk and certainly getting him involved early. The second part of it, though, is Brandon Ayuk stepping up, because really when you were looking at it from a draft process, you knew Deebo Samuel was going to be the first 49ers receiver drafted. George Kittle, based on the position that he plays, which was clearly the tight end position, was disappointing across the board. You know you're going to draft him to be a starter, and clearly Christian McCaffrey, one of the top 2 or 3 picks off the board. Can Ayuk step up and play at this level? Now, he's not going to do this on a week-to-week basis, but you can feel more confident starting him maybe in 2 receiver leagues, but definitely in 3 receiver leagues, no matter the opponent. But there's going to be weeks like this, unfortunately. We saw it at the end of last season. When Deebo Samuel was out for that 3-game stretch, George Kittle was an absolute monster. Then Deebo came back, and Kittle sort of faded. So you just hope that we're not going to get stretches of this where 2 guys are great and 2 guys are not so great, or obviously not worth starting. The thing is that you'll still start Kittle. You'll obviously start McCaffrey. I hope we just don't get to a point where we have to make a decision between Samuel and Ayuk. So maybe next week we get the Samuel game, and then we just have to get more consistency out of these guys moving forward. But like you said, there's only one ball, and we'll see if they're able to support all 4 of these guys. Brock Purdy's able to support all 4 of these guys, but it does make you more encouraged about Brandon Ayuk as a starter moving forward after this amazing game against Pittsburgh.
Yeah, he flat out balled in that one. Jamey Eisenberg, one of the best fantasy people in the business. And you can catch more of Jamey's work on the Fantasy Football Today podcast, where he and the crew give you all the tips and tricks to achieve the most success in your fantasy leagues. Fantasy Football Today is available wherever you get your podcasts.